The land itself, the idea of vineyards, the idea of place, is being explored to a greater degree today than it has ever been in the modern day. And so I think that that's really exciting. Like all great wines of the world, Champagne is very much a wine of terroir. It obviously it comes from a very specific place, and it is capable of expressing its origins with astonishing precision and complexity. The Champagne region is a large one, as you know. This right here is only a portion of it. This is the heart of it, around the cities of Reims and Epernay. The region covers about 34,000 hectares. Reims is a city at the 49th parallel. So it's historically this has been at the northernmost limits of viable wine growing in France. And so that position, its geographical position, has a very strong impact on the wines. I mean, in comparison, here in Los Angeles, we're at the 34th parallel. New York City is at the 40th, so that's the same as Madrid. So France is at the same latitude as Vancouver, BC, really. And so because of that, historically, of course, you have wines of lower ripeness than other regions, of higher acidity, and that's what is able to create the wines that we know and love. As I said, Champagne is a large area. The appellation extends just a little bit north of France. To the west, the westernmost vineyards are closer to Paris than they are to Epernay. In the south, the Côte des Bar, which is in the department of the Aube. So Les Riedel, at the very southernmost tip, is only about an hour's drive from Chablis. So of course this covers a large section of central France or central northern France, and because of that, we can't really speak about Champagne as a single terroir, right? The terroir varies quite a bit over the region, and so Champagne is like any other wine region, Bordeaux or Burgundy or whatever. Champagne is really a set of terroirs rather than a single one. So, as I said, very northerly latitude. Champagne is, of course, famous for its chalky subsoils. These soils are from the Cretaceous era, largely, at least in the heart of Champagne, around Cramant and Epernay. And specifically from the Campanian era, which is about 72 to 80 million years old. But we talk about chalk in Champagne, but there are a lot of other soils that are going on. And this is something that's really important to understand as you move from one subregion to the next. So in some place like the Côte de Blanc, which is of course famous for Chardonnay, the soils, the subsoil of chalk is very close to the surface. There's very little topsoil. It could be like as little as 10 or 20 centimeters. But when you're in other areas, like say the Montagne de Reims, or the Valley de la Marne especially, the chalk can actually be quite far below the surface. So in the Montagne de Reims, it's there could be a meter or more of clay, of gravels, of sometimes even sand. The Valley de la Marne is very well known for having deep clay soils above the chalk, and the farther west you go, in fact, the deeper the clay gets, which gives you a very different expression in the wine than you would get from, say, the Côte de Blanc. In the very south, in the Aube, it's actually not even chalk at all, but it is Kimmeridgian soil. It's like I said, it's just an hour from Chablis, and the soils are identical to the soils of the Grand and Premier Crus of Chablis. The climate of Champagne, is of course legendary for being very poor. It's generally very cool, very wet. It's largely maritime, so living in Champagne is not all that much different from, say, the Pacific Northwest. But I think the real difference that you see is in the winter and in the summer, you have these spikes that derive from a more continental influence. So, winemakers in Champagne sometimes talk about vintages as oceanic years or maritime years or continental years. Something like 2003 or 2005 is very much this continental year where it's more influenced from the heat that's more common in the eastern parts of Europe. Whereas vintages like this one, 2016, where it rained for the first 7 months of the year. This was very much an oceanic vintage for the first portion of it. But I think that's something that we don't always think about, but I think that's important to note, is that Champagne lies at the intersection of two really kind of broad climactic areas. As I said, 34,000 hectares of vines. And it covers 320 vine-growing villages, and that may actually even be increasing soon. As you know, Champagne is generally made up of 3 grape varieties, right? Pinot Noir, Meunier, Chardonnay. Pinot Noir is historically the most important grape in Champagne, and it still accounts for the largest percentage. But in fact, it's this famous sommelier trick question, right? Like, how many grape varieties are allowed in Champagne? And the normal answer is 3. But in fact, that's not the correct answer. There are actually 7 grape varieties that are legally permitted. The other 4 grape varieties represent this tiny, less than 1%, less than 0.3% of plantings. But they are historically relevant. Yeah. There are some producers who are exploring these again today. We're going to take slide 1, which is a look at Chardonnay in the Côte de Blanc, which the Côte de Blanc is the classic Chardonnay terroir of the Champagne region. It is where the really famous Chardonnay Grand Crus are located. And here we have 4 wines that are 100% Chardonnay, but that are very different, not only in terms of the style in which they're made, but different in terms of terroir as well. The first wine is from a small producer named Dhondt. The Wine Education Council has made this fantastic tasting book in here, which has all the information that you would ever want to know about domains and these wines, and so that's really useful. But so Dhondt is it's a small family estate in the village of Oger, which is one of the Grand Crus of the Côte de Blanc. Oger is in the south. If you can broadly divide the Côte de Blanc into north and south. For me, you can certainly say that there is a character of the Côte de Blanc as differentiated from the Montagne France or the Vallée de la Marne. Chardonnay from the Côte de Blanc, it has the most finesse. It's the most overtly chalky. It's capable of the most complexity. But even within the Côte de Blanc itself, you can make finer distinctions. For me, the difference between north and south, in the north there's a little more clay. The wines tend to have a little bit more body. Whereas in the south, you really feel this pure chalk. It's most vineyards in the southern villages of Oger, Le Mesnil, Vertu, they have very little topsoil, and so you have this really pure expression of chalk. I mean, I think tasting this this Blanc de Blanc, this really shows off Dhondt's style. I think this is his non-vintage brut. He favors wines that have very pronounced acidity. And you feel that here. It's I think very typical of what we think of as Chardonnay from Champagne. Yeah, brisk, racy, fantastic to start an evening with. Also, so this is not pure Oger, but Oger is a village that sits in a little bowl. It's kind of like this amphitheater on the hill. And so it's an unusually warm terroir, for the Côte de Blanc. And I think that you feel that in the wines. Like here, you have this crisp spine of acidity, you have this prominent chalkiness, but there's also this you also feel the ripeness. There's this roundness of fruit, there's this body. And in that sense, I think that's very expressive of where it comes from. Oger is actually not so dissimilar to the village of Chouilly, or at least in my mind. It's actually, if you talk to growers from those two villages, they would say they're completely different. But Chouilly is actually the northernmost Grand Cru of the Côte de Blanc. And so the second wine that we have from Vazart-Coquart is 100% Chouilly. Chouilly, so the soils, as I said, it's oftentimes in Chouilly you can have a deeper level of clay in the topsoil, and that tends to give a wine more body, more richness. But also because Chouilly is close to the river, it's a particularly warm, area. So Chouilly's wines, even compared to Oger, are much rounder and much, they're earlier maturing. They're very accessible. They're very round and inviting. And that really differentiates it from the other Grand Crus of the Côte de Blanc. And I think that you can see that here. Vazart. Vazart's style is again, one that focuses quite a bit on structure. So, certainly you feel acidity, but at the same time, comparing the first two wines, you see, especially for me on the finish, how the fruit is rounder, the fruit is more open. It's sort of a gentler and friendlier wine, and that's very, very typical of Chouilly. This is terroir in action. Vazart is a this is a really interesting estate. Again, it's another family estate. The current proprietor is Jean-Pierre Vazart, who has been in charge of the domain by himself, completely since 2005. So he's fairly young, and his father made very good wines, but I think he's really taken the estate to a next level, and I think this is a producer, really a producer to keep your eye on, in the near future. Demiere-Ansiot. This now we're going back down to Oger. Demiere-Ansiot is a tiny, a really tiny estate. I guess, okay, to take a step back. The first two wines, of course, were non-vintage wines. So not only are they blends, in the case of the second one, it's pure Chouilly, but they're blends of terroirs, but blends of vintages as well. So this, coming from 2010, which was not the easiest vintage, ever. I think that this wine shows the character, not only of Oger, but also, also of the vintage, which I think really emphasizes structure over fruit. It was a vintage that that had a lot of rain, and you had to work really well in the vineyards to be able to to produce vintage quality wine. But again, here I think if you think about the first wine, and I think that you can see that same combination of roundness in body from the ripe terroir, and that intense chalkiness on the finish. That it's I think even more pronounced in this wine than in the wines from Chouilly, right, from the Vazart. And again, this I think is another illustration of what I was talking about in the contrast between north and south of Côte de Blanc. Yeah. So in between Chouilly and Oger, there are two villages that historically have been the most famous in the Côte de Blanc, and that's Cramant and Avize. As I said before, Pinot Noir has historically been the most important grape variety in Champagne, and this goes back to before Champagne was even a sparkling wine. Yeah, so going back to like the 15th and 16th centuries. It wasn't until Champagne became a sparkling wine, at the end of the 17th, beginning of the 18th centuries, that Chardonnay was even really taken seriously. Because before, as a still wine, it made pretty acidic and pretty weedy stuff, but they found that it was terrific for making sparkling wine. And so the fame of Cramant and Avize really dates from this time. And they were really the original Grand Crus of the Côte de Blanc. And I think that if you think about Chouilly as being really kind of round and generous, and then you go farther down to Oger and Le Mesnil especially, being really chalky and focused, Cramant and Avize kind of strike the perfect balance in between the two. They give you body and complexity, but a really intense minerality as well. So the fourth wine in this flight is from Le Brun Servenay, which is another small estate, and this is from 2005, which was another difficult vintage for different reasons. It was very warm. And that created different viticultural problems. But so even keeping that in mind, I think here this is a good illustration of what I was describing. Where you feel a greater minerality than in the wine from Chouilly, the second wine. But you feel a more concentrated body and a greater richness than say like Demiere-Ansiot, right, the third wine. And again, this is really a function of Avize and Cramant. This is again showing the terroir of individual areas in the Côte de Blanc.